All right, good morning, gentlemen. Bob here, back to break down some Bitcoin. Long weekend of driving, but I'm here, and man, let's talk for a second. I guess I could say that I was happy to have been spending some time with some family this weekend, so as to avoid watching the death and destruction taking place. But let's get right down to this here, and here's the deal. Went ahead and pulled up the Brave New Liquid Coin Index, which is one we've talked about before. And, as far as it goes, and let's get that off of there. Oops. We've talked about this one before, but the simple fact of the matter is some things have changed, I suppose I'd say, since we last talked about this. And the obvious being that we were looking for something to bottom out a little bit sooner. And obviously we're not getting that at the moment. So here's kind of what we're looking at this point. This is a monthly chart, and I figured might as well pull up this time frame just to point out one very important detail here. You're going to notice that when Bitcoin gets to the bottom of markets, historically speaking, and this is a full history on Bitcoin, right? So you're seeing right here, right now, that every time on the monthly chart that it gets to this point, it does hold it, and it eventually rounds out into a new high. All right. So here is the most important thing that we can sit here and conclude as we are looking at this chart, that if ultimately Bitcoin fails to hold this level this time around, and let's say that it, maybe for more than a couple of days, right? Like, there's a monthly chart, so if it fails to hold it for a month for sure, or if it dips below here and actually closes a month out below this level, could have a very, at that point, you're gonna start hearing me talking a little bit more about the concept that this actually may be a very valid pattern, and that this may be lost, and that that Bitcoin could be in trouble for an extended period of time, and frankly the traditional markets as well. But more specific to this chart, I mean, Bitcoin, this is potentially problematic here. But we're here. We're at that point. Now, if we zoom in on this chart a little bit here, you can see that the every time that this market goes into a deep contraction, it is this red line that becomes the support for the new rebound. But I'm looking at it here, and we've got, here's a trend line here that maybe does or does not hold weight, but you can see that trend line is lining up pretty well with the 80 moving average right now. Bitcoin has never, at least that I can tell in the history of Bitcoin, it has never closed a monthly candle below that line. Would love to not see it start now, right? Like, that's the big thing, is ideally that doesn't start now, because that means that this market is now going to become vastly more unpredictable in the event that we get that, right? We've got history to show us that that's never happened. If it happens, oh boy, where do we go from here? So that's really what I'm going to be. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing we got to keep an eye on for this month is where it closes out. But that being understood, I mean, again, here, this spent, once it finally hit that level, it spent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, essentially 8 months trading sideways before it finally popped up out of there. In this particular case right here, this January 19, kind of end of 19, beginning of, or end of 18, beginning of 19 period, it spent just a few months and then just rebounded hard off of that. And then here we got the COVID crash, which, that was a quick one since that was a massive liquidity event. You got the recovery back up the other side. Now, the one thing I look at and I see on this chart, and I think that it's at least worth acknowledging this, is that historically Bitcoin goes into these big rounded bottoms, kind of, here it even kind of formed a handle out of the cup, and then round it out into another cup in reality. And this is another handle here. So again, I'm looking at this and I'm talking to you about potential doom and gloom. Okay, so understand that I am in fact talking to you about that. But the simple reality is that this still has the potential to spring up out of here. It's just a matter of where this price action ends up. As far as where it ends up before it actually springs up out of there. At this stage, I mean, if you look at, and the reason I keep this chart here is because I do want to see what it looks like on the monthly. I tried to put as much as I could in here as far as like trading ranges. And the reality is that from a monthly level, this is the next like most supportive area. You see that number over there on the right? I mean, we're talking $14,000 Bitcoin. Do we get there? I don't know. But you can, I think the biggest thing I'd point out to you is that we've now just, we beat the hell out of this range, right? We were in there for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I don't know, 15, 16 months. We beat on this range right here. This range has essentially never been tested, right? I mean, it's just you got these 2, 3, 4 months of upside that blasts right through this entire range. Well, here you go. Here's our chance to test that out and put in some market, put in some market structure in that section. But again, do we have to come all the way back down to 14,000 in order to accomplish this task? Potentially, certainly potentially. I mean, that's, again, there's a reason I got this stuff on this chart here. And then, you look even further down, and I mean, if that were to break down and that breaks down, this breaks down, then we're here. Maybe here I'd put another one potentially, and then we're here. I mean, this thing, and again, don't get me wrong. I'm not calling for a straight line down to $100 Bitcoin or anything, but again, there's some serious and we've been talking about it. I mean, it's not as if we hadn't at least discussed it. I was really expecting that we were going to find a way to recover at least temporarily and push up to 35, 37,000 before we rolled back over. But no, we're rolling over, and it's not pretty out there. So we'll zoom in on some shorter term time frames, but I mean, this thing, this will be kind of the number that I would look for as a potential wick maybe at this point. And just, I mean, just picture, and again, this number is not comparable to most of the index or most of the exchange numbers, right? 26 and change. If we go over to KuCoin, it's 24 and change right now. But just understanding the structure itself is the important part here. And we'll get over to the shorter term time frames, but like 24, 22, both numbers that are realistic. And again, 21, there are some numbers that suddenly sound like they shouldn't be real, but they are. And here we are. We're pretty well at that stage where we got to start at least talking about those numbers, and then the crazy numbers that you'd think, again, how is this possible? We'll see. I mean, again, I could draw a bunch of different lines on this chart, and kind of try to use that to assess some different aspects here. But you could see, there was this line that was supportive for years. I mean, this is a monthly chart. I mean, it was supportive from December, January 13, let's say, all the way. This one held up all the way until here, which November of 2018. So, I mean, we're talking this particular trend line held up positively for 5 years, basically. And then it lost it, retested it, bearish retest, bearish retest, bearish retest. Now, this little trend line, and this one's maybe not as significant because it was only really, I was trying to, show this rise from here to there. That one was lost. But now this guy here touches, fairly valid trend line, got to have this hold. This has to hold. This has to hold. It just has to. Otherwise, things become fairly problematic. And, I guess here would be you look at this chart and you see all these ones and then the 8, the 3. Simple fact of the matter is this right here was the most wicked bearish divergence possibly imaginable. And just take a look at how the chart plays out. You've got this high over here, which is represented by this high on the RSI, right? Price goes way up here, sets it, goes on to put in an equivalent high on the RSI, and yet boom, straight down, because again, that's a bearish divergence. That you've got a higher price here than on the RSI. Then you got this big sweeping look here. Again, same concept. That was a bearish divergence. This is the one that broke the camel's back, though, right? So this is the highest price Bitcoin has ever been at, and yet the RSI level way down here, and it fell out of the overbought territory, and it's just died since then. You can see what's happened each of the times we've had big bearish divergences on the monthly, especially throughout the course of the bull market section of history. Here we had this one where 2 month and then setting a new high, 3 months sets a new high, and then protracted downside. I mean, let's go ahead and measure this out just so I'm not trying to count it again, but I mean, it basically, that last time, and ignore the percentage, I'm not too caught up on that, even though it matters for something, but, and we're talking 2 straight years of this garbage sideways stuff, and we're what, how long are we into this realistically? We're 8 months, more or less, 9 months, so there's some, there's some things that would make you question a lot of things here. But let's go ahead and we'll stop talking about this monthly chart for a second. Let's get on over to our weekly chart that we use and talk about that, because you can see here, again, price is a little different. But the neat thing is, at least at the moment, and I say neat, but it's still terrible. But neat thing is, right at the moment, I've got different trend lines I drew on here, different support and resistance, etc. I guess if you want to say on a positive note, we did come down to this level, and you can see that it is at least attempting some level of support, right? I mean, it seems to be at least making an attempt at it. And then we look at the weekly RSI. Look how buried this thing is. You see this down here? This is below 30. Just for the sake of comparison, let's actually go back over to our Brave New Liquid Coin Index, just since it's got a more extensive history, and let's take a look at the weekly. We can see here we've got limited touches down here, and I think we've talked about this at least at some point. All right, so here's one. Came down here, touched. Man, lots of sideways trash, right? Lots of sideways trash. I mean, that's a couple months there. What do we got there? January 15 to October 15, basically. September, October. A lot of sideways garbage. Here we had another touchdown there, and maybe only about 2 months of sideways trash. And then here didn't quite reach that level of over. Here, that's kind of a crazy thing to look at there. I mean, that's the March COVID crash. That one didn't even get as deeply oversold as we are now, or these periods of time previously. So to be frank, I mean, you look at that concept and you think to yourself, damn, it would be nice to have had a liquidity wick as opposed to this slow bleeding, just absolutely destructive, demoralizing kind of, constant downside. But in either case, here we are. Again, this is where we're at. So, all right, let's get back over to the other chart there and just kind of talk briefly about that. So I brought up the fact that we're deeply oversold on the weekly, and I'm bringing up all these things for a reason. I mean, there's very limited precedence for these things in the past, and we're now either going to continue along the previous precedents, or we're going to be finding out very soon what new world Bitcoin is going to be like here for the time being. We've got a possible bullish divergence on the weekly chart, so this is at least a positive from the standpoint that, we had one over here. The following week it went on to go from, somewhere in this 33 range up to 45. With the extensive amount of downside here again, when we do see this thing rebound, it could very well be just crazy, right? I mean, again, weekly chart, Bitcoin, you don't see it get oversold too often like that. At least on the on this particular chart, this one's Binance. Last time I got to that point, some pretty ugly red over here, huge rebound week, some sideways garbage, and then eventually just kind of gave itself a nice little uptrend and eventually popped out before reversing for COVID-19. But again, I don't know. There's some it's some very interesting stuff out here right now. I'll just say that much. And possible bullish divergence there. If we go over to the daily, I can assure you there's a bullish divergence there, indeed. But man, I look at this point. The only thing I could say is that hopefully this level holds. If it doesn't, then again, these are our next downside targets as far as what I've got marked. You'd be looking, and there's probably, I'd say 21,000 is probably a reasonable number to look at too, and for a couple reasons. Again, weekly chart, here's the 200 sitting right about 22 and change. If we click it over to the monthly chart, and again, this is not the Brave New Coin or Brave New Coin Liquid Index, but you see here the bull support band, at least on this chart, is somewhere in the 21,000 range. But again, I mean, take a look at this chart tells you a lot about what where there are still buy orders and sell orders stacked. You got a decent amount of activity here and above, which 20,000 makes sense because that was a prior all-time high, but there's no market structure there. So I mean, again, we're talking feasibility like sub $10,000 Bitcoin at some point here. I don't expect immediately, but this double top, oh my God, that double top just. All right, and then I know I had mentioned this, and I think I even stopped myself dead in my tracks while I was recording last week, and I looked at this and I said, possible double top there. And sometimes you get this bias in your mind, you get something in your mind that says, no, this was a bottoming pattern, and it was. It just didn't spring up the other side, right? If this was truly going to bottom, and sometimes you got to remind yourself of these things. If this was truly going to bottom. Picture that monthly or the weekly chart that we were just looking at a moment ago, where I was saying, eventually Bitcoin went on to put in a handful of weekly candles that just kind of did a slow rise and then broke out to the upside. This needed to break this level. It had to, and it didn't. Then we get this double top, nasty. All right, now we just got to hope this thing right here is a final back test of this trend line. At which point, maybe, just maybe, we finally get our push out of there. Again, if we talk about the idea that this thing was a falling wedge, and I've seen plenty of falling wedges break to the bottom here recently, a lot of times, though, they can end up being fake outs, bounces right back in, down, up, and out. So there's still again, I don't want to doom and gloom us again, especially when we're already, everybody's already looking at the market. I imagine everybody else feeling the same way that I am about kind of some world events and everything. I don't know. The news comes out at the worst possible times, right? Like I don't know. Seeing that there's, China banks are having runs on their money and they're refusing withdrawals, and there's just a lot of craziness out there in the world. But, not getting too far off track here again. We've got to hold this level. If this level doesn't hold 21-ish, if that level doesn't hold 19, 17, 14, 10, again, this thing can get ugly from there. But again, here we are. We're oversold. The RSI is higher than the than where it was over here, yet the price action is lower. Thus, we do have a daily bullish divergence that will come into play here. And the question is, how does this one pull off out of here? Hopefully it V's right on and it just, boom, stratosphere move. But again, the indications would seem to suggest that it's far more likely at this point that if we don't get a V move out of here, that we're about to be mired in misery for the next few months, more than likely. And we've talked about it before. I mean, trading volume